Hi, so I want to talk to you today about clustered, regularly interspaced palindromic repeats, or CRISPR for ease. Better minds than I have discussed the science, such as Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. They did a great video which kind of led me thinking into this, credit where it's due. So there is a link to that somewhere around my head or below or both. And I definitely recommend taking a look at it if you want to look into the science. But the basic idea is it goes in, splits DNA into its RNA strands, and depending on what it's programmed to do, changes elements of those RNA strands, puts them back in, goes on its merry way, repeats it if necessary. Because that's the great thing, it can sort of replicate those RNA strands. And yeah, it's a very interesting technology from a gene therapy kind of point of view. There are many people today who would love gene therapy to help them with certain genetic conditions, and that's a great use for it. Unfortunately, there are also less ideal potential uses for it. Not too long in our history, there was one particular guy who, despite not being that way himself, thought that blonde-haired, blue-eyed people were the superior race. Must have been very conflicting for him. But his method was obviously, because something like CRISPR wasn't around, get rid of the things that you don't like, namely Jews, millions of them. And that's a massively horrific thing from our comparatively recent history. And that's what scares me, because imagine someone like him with the power to just genetically change them. His method was, well, the best way to stop them breeding is to stop them existing. But would he be seen less evil if he'd just kind of gone, yeah, you can breed all you want, but they've got to come into this lab, have their genes changed so that they're now perfect. Get rid of the Jewiness from them, maybe he wouldn't be seen much better, but at least he wasn't out and out killing people, so, I don't know. It's a very grey area on morals and ethics, and that's the big issue with eugenics as a whole. The idea that one particular, or a group of particular genetic traits is superior to everything else. Now, I've said in the past that certain types of people perhaps shouldn't breed, but I know that that's wrong, and I would never take it further than that. It's kind of been like, I wish stupid people wouldn't breed so much, but at the end of the day, intelligence is nature and nurture, so that wouldn't help anyone. But I say it kind of in jest when I'm frustrated. I would never go to the extremes, but there are people who would. There are people out there who really hold the belief that, say, people of African descent are the devil and should, just not exist. So what if you could make their babies all white? Same with, say, Arabs. Same with Jews. Why not? While we're talking about it. Some people think that people who have heterochromic eyes should be eradicated, so you just make sure that you tweak it in there. Obviously, people who've had it due to an accident, you wouldn't be able to do anything about. Maybe, I don't know, you probably could actually go in and repair the genetic structure. So, it is a scary area, and like I say, that's eugenics as a whole. We are in the position perhaps now where, it's a long way off, but I think by having these discussions, having these thoughts, and now we're preparing the future. There is an idea that perhaps this could become almost like building up like a grocery list of what you want in your baby. It's like, well, we're naturally redheads, but I'd love a blonde child. Can we make that happen for definite? Or, well, we've both got brown eyes, but I'd love like a green-eyed kid. So can we have that, please? Various things like that. And that's kind of perhaps the light-hearted look at it, but it's also kind of a bit unnerving on its own. But the other thing is genetic diseases, genetic disabilities, conditions that you have no control over because they're hard-coded into you. Now, I did read a couple of months back of a woman who was sort of looking into people who, have tests to see if their children will have Down syndrome, because it's one of those kind of big things that's obviously known as difficult to deal with. Doctors really don't help with that. They often play up the bad side in her experience. And, she's gone talking to people, because she's got a child with Down syndrome. And she finds it amazing because the normal social filters that you or I kind of go, probably shouldn't say that, he doesn't really exhibit that. And to her, that's a source of fun and amusement. Not laughing at him necessarily. I'm not making her out to be an evil person, but she's taking the positive out of it. She's having the joy of a child, because many children do that, but they learn after a point. And no parent, thinks it's cruel to laugh at a genetically typical child, if you will, doing that. So she, as I say, she takes the positive outlook, but she understands that some people, do get the test and decide to terminate. Now, her angle was that there's apparently a newer, less invasive test available to test for that, and would people still, would people go for that more? Would people still terminate? And it's more of an education kind of thing on the fact that it isn't a death sentence for a child. They do live much longer than they used to. The life expectancy on average was probably like maybe into the early 20s. But now, there are people older than I who were condemned, if you will, from a young age, and they're surviving very well, thank you. There's a woman who gave TED Talks about it. She had a teacher who just went, well, I'm not going to be able to teach you anything. It's like, well, how about you teach me like this? This is how I learn. And they are still fast friends to this day. She swam the channel, I believe, and things like that. So, but that's what scares me. These kind of genetic conditions could be eradicated, and we lose perhaps an element of our humanity as a whole in trying to prevent something that actually perhaps doesn't need preventing. There is the idea that once we eradicate all disease in every form, what's next? And that's where perhaps kind of going, well, we don't have to worry about healthy people anymore. We just want to get rid of the blondes. We want to get rid of the redheads. It could easily extrapolate into that. And there is another ethical quandary that comes up, because obviously we're now looking into the future. We're looking at this is a potential. But there is always the thought that, this is my sort of moral and ethical standing now, that, should we do that? When it's perhaps widely available and easily done, would the moral question, in fact, be, should we not get rid of these things to get the best chance of life for a child? I mean, I've recently been watching Deep Space Nine, because I never watched it in its entirety when it was on. I caught bits. And I didn't even realise that Dr. Bashir was, spoiler alert, genetically enhanced. And there was a whole episode where he's discussing the idea of, you never gave me the chance. You just saw that I was struggling from a young age, wasn't brilliantly athletic, wasn't particularly intelligent, and you had me genetically enhanced. But you never gave me the chance to perhaps grow up. I might have just been a late developer. I might have needed some extra time to get to that point. And that's, I think, what the nut of this is. The kernel of the quandary is it better to see what happens, take the risks, or is it better to just be somewhat selfish, I guess? Even though it seems selfless, it is perhaps quite selfish, because you're like, well, I want my child to be the best. And I don't have an easy answer for it. A lot of these sort of me thinking kind of pieces don't have easy answers, and I kind of like it that way. I think if I had all the easy answers, then it wouldn't be as interesting for me. But yeah, it's a very difficult question. And as I say, I'm ambivalent towards CRISPR. It has great potential for both good and evil. So let me know what you think. Leave a comment, whatever. And, hopefully we can enter into a wonderfully deep philosophical discussion. It is the internet, so I won't hold my breath. But until next time, as always, take care.